I can be the 7th or 8th person to welcome you here today. We're very glad that you're here. I know we just saw an excellent presentation up in Tulsa. I thank you for all being here at this panel. Today, as was mentioned upstairs, it's a topic that can be very difficult, a topic that can be very uncomfortable, but a topic that nonetheless needs to be addressed, and especially by people in this type of audience, and in the general populace as well. A topic that needs to be addressed, a topic that needs to be confronted going forward. Today we have 4 panelists who work in this arena on a daily basis. And so in just a moment I will introduce each of them. We'll hear from each of them as to the arenas in which they work, how they go about dealing with this issue, and the things that they're doing directly to confront sex trafficking, specifically in Atlanta. Afterwards, I'll have some questions for them, and then we'll reserve the last 15-20 minutes or so for questions from you. So anything on your mind regarding what they do or what you can do to help with this issue, definitely be thinking of those issues and those questions, and there'll be a time at the end for that. Today, we have 4 panelists. We'll hear from each of them in turn. First, we have Ms. Rose Scott. She is an award-winning journalist and producer of the afternoon news on WABE 90.1 FM, Atlanta's NPR affiliate. Ms. Rose primarily covers education, minority health, gender issues, and sports. For the last few years, Ms. Rose has been covering child sex trafficking of minors in Atlanta, as well as the country's biggest cheating scandal found in the Atlanta public schools. She often moderates panels on both of these 2 topics. Public Broadcasting Atlanta produced an award-winning news documentary on child sex trafficking in Atlanta, and it was an eye-opener. As one of the journalists in the documentary, Rose received a 2012 Southeast Regional Emmy Award and a 2012 Edward R. Murrow Award. She is also the recipient of an Atlanta Association of Black Journalists Award and awards from the Georgia Associated Press. Ms. Rose was also named by Girls Inc. as a Strong, Smart, and Bold Award winner. Ms. Rose often speaks to youth groups, mentors journalism students, and volunteers with youth empowerment initiatives. As a St. Louis, Missouri native, Ms. Rose lives in Atlanta with her Siamese and Maine Coon cats. Our next panelist is Mr. Brian Johnson. He is an assistant special agent in charge for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit. Mr. Johnson was born and raised in Rome, Georgia, and has been in Georgia his entire life. He attended and graduated Georgia Southern University, and he began his law enforcement career in 1995 and has worked in the metro Atlanta area in various capacities since 1998. In July 2011, realizing the growing issue in Georgia, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation started a specialized work unit to investigate human trafficking cases, specifically child sex trafficking cases. In December 2012, Mr. Johnson was promoted to the position of ASAC and currently supervises the unit at GBI that conducts these types of criminal investigations. Next on the panel, we have Ms. Susan Coppage. Ms. Coppage has worked in the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia for 13 years and serves as the office's Human Trafficking Coordinator. During her tenure, she has prosecuted a variety of complex criminal cases, including human trafficking, fraud, and government corruption. In November 2012, Ms. Coppage tried the leader, Amador Cortez Meza, of a family-run Mexican human trafficking ring. The United States prosecuted 6 defendants and rescued 10 victims, including 4 juveniles. 9 victims testified during the course of the trial, and Cortez Meza was convicted on 19 counts of human trafficking, smuggling, and importing for prostitution. In March 2011, Cortez Meza was sentenced to 40 years in custody in order to pay over $290,000 in restitution to the victims. Ms. Coppage is originally from Dalton, Georgia, and clerked for United States District Judge William C. O'Kelly, who usually prefers Emory law clerks. After 4 years at the Department of, started in there for y'all's benefit, I'm sure. After 4 years at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., she came back home to Georgia. She received her law degree from Stanford University and her undergraduate degree from Duke University. Our final panelist today, we have Ms. Jennifer Swain, who has been passionately involved with serving commercially sexually exploited victims for the past 6 years. As a Stop CSEC program manager, she leads the program's current efforts to stop the demand for prostituted youth through a future, not a past campaign, and to prevent youth deemed high risk from becoming child sex trafficking victims through Youth Spark Voices. Ms. Swain's influential vision aided in the development of Georgia's first CSEC-specific prevention program for youth ages 11 to 17, Youth Spark Voices. She speaks, trains, and advocates on behalf of child sex trafficking victims to various state agencies throughout the state and may have contact with children regarding warning signs and available services. Prior to her work in the nonprofit world, Swain worked in communications for Fox 5 WZDX in Alabama and has experience working with youth through her longtime volunteer work with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Alabama. She is a graduate of Alabama A&M University with a bachelor's degree in communication with specialized child sex trafficking training and education from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Girls Educating and Mentoring Services, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So this time, we will hear from our impressive panel of four. We'll begin with Ms. Rose, and each of the panelists will just talk to you about what each person does on a daily basis and what activities they're involved with that help combat sex trafficking.
Thank you. Well, good morning, and let me say on behalf of Public Broadcasting Atlanta, thank you for inviting me as part of this panel. I'm the journalist, but I have a pen and pad here. Taking notes. These are words that I hear a lot. Really? Wow. I didn't know. Why are you covering this?
It's a very lonely place when you don't have anybody to turn to but your predator.
It's big business.
When we start talking about it happening in Georgia, people almost instantly say no.
It happens in Atlanta every day.
There are people that say, wow, this is happening in Georgia.
It's child sex trafficking. Tonight, Public Broadcasting Atlanta presents a special report. Where is this happening?
It may be lawyers, doctors, priests. It's people that you don't think of.
And what can we do about it?
Everybody has an opportunity to impact this issue.
That's a great trailer. 2 years ago, Public Broadcasting was asked to create a news documentary on sex trafficking in Atlanta. I have a radio background. My colleague Dennis O'Hare, who's also a mentor, was a TV guy. So my response was, television? That's what makeup. But more important, it was the issue. Out of doing that documentary, How to Stop the Candy Shop, I met these two women up here. And I've also worked with the GBI on stories. But part of this for me was being able to bring awareness. You know, as journalists, they teach you in that first 101 class, besides of who, what, when, where, and why, you can't be an advocate. And people have asked me, well, why are you covering this? And while we can't advocate for policy reform or legislation, we certainly can disseminate information that may prompt people to do something. And if nothing less, you can't say, I didn't know. Shirley Franklin, our former mayor, who really years ago tried to help bring this issue to the forefront. And Renee Unterman, who can tell you that there was a time when nobody wanted to talk about this. So as a journalist, my responsibility is to tell the who, what, when, where, and why. But if I also can tell a story, give voice to someone like Keisha, the young lady who opened that clip. And if you take anything else from that, is when she says, it's a lonely road, but the only person you can turn to is your predator. That's a powerful statement. And as a journalist, if I can't be an advocate, I can certainly tell her story. So for me, in covering this issue, and it started about 6 years ago, my news director, he said, yeah, I see the GBI rescuing some kids, call about it. That was his approach. And so I made one phone call to Kathy McCullough, who was then with the Future Not a Past, which is Jennifer's organization. And I have been involved ever since as a journalist, and doing what I can besides just reporting the stories. It's not a black issue, it's not a white issue, it's not a poor issue, it's not a rich issue, it's an issue. And I always call it a horrific epidemic. So my approach to covering this issue is to make sure that we can tell the who, what, when, where, and why with those that are actually doing policy reforms, those that are prosecuting these men and women who are involved, and those who are trying to take the victims into survivors. And for me, my personal approach is to make sure that I can do what I can so we can keep the Keishas away from those that want to harm them. So that's my approach, and that's why I'm in this issue.
Good morning. My name is Brian Johnston. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And I'm one of the supervisors over the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit for the GBI. And I'm going to tell you a little bit, instead of telling you a lot about myself, I'm going to tell you kind of what our agency, the GBI's role in all of this is. First off, with the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit, we call it CEAC because we have to abbreviate it. We have several different missions. One of those missions is the statewide investigation of child sex trafficking, and I call it child sex trafficking because we are laser focused on that portion of the human trafficking issue. At this moment in time, because of our resources, we don't concentrate on labor trafficking or really not even the illegal immigrants and things like that that are being trafficked either. We don't ignore those cases by any stretch. We rely on our federal law enforcement partners to pick up and investigate those cases. But we are certainly laser focused on the domestic child sex trafficking portion of this issue. In our unit, we are also the host Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force agency for the state of Georgia. And that's important because it is directly related to the child sex trafficking issue. As part of the host agency for the ICAC program, we house the program, and we have over 180 affiliates spread out through the state of Georgia with our local agencies, our other state agencies, as well as our federal agencies who are ICAC affiliates. And with that, we are able to investigate child exploitation cases, not just from a 10-agent work unit with the GBI, but with it's a force multiplier. We've got investigators all over the state, as well as in federal agencies that can combat this issue. One of the things that we get a lot of, being the host agency for ICAC, is we get cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And those come to us directly. We review those, and then we'll shoot those out to our affiliate partners throughout the state based on the severity of the case and the location of the case. And I can tell you, being a supervisor in that unit, and being primarily responsible for the child sex trafficking side of the house, I get about 40 cyber tips per month from the National Center just on child sex trafficking cases. These tips are coming in from the general public, folks like you. They're coming in from internet service providers. We get a lot of tips from Backpage, from moderators at Backpage who are actually looking at some of the ads and sending them our way. But anyway, just to show you the nature of that, it averages about 40 a month just on the cyber tips. Another way we investigate cases or we initiate cases in our office is with a collaboration or a partnership with the CSEC community. And you're probably going to hear a lot of that throughout today because my goal and my role in this is to investigate. And I got to keep my lane of travel in the investigation portion of it. But this problem is not something that is an investigator's problem to solve alone. We rely on our partners in the CSEC community. We rely on our medical providers. We rely on our social service providers. We rely on our faith-based organizations. And we rely on our NGOs, on our non-governmental organizations to step in. Because if I step out of my lane and I don't investigate and provide prosecutors with quality cases to actually put people behind bars for this horrific crime, then I'm failing in my duty. And at the same time, I have to rely on my partners in this to step up and to provide assistance and care and aftercare assistance to the victims and things of that nature. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this. This isn't just a law enforcement investigator's problem. This is a problem that is going to have to be combated with a collaborative partnership idea. And I think in the state of Georgia, I think we get that. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we get and we have the foundation to be a model in this country of how we're working this. We get together as part of the CSEC task force that's sponsored by the Governor's Office for Children and Families. We get together on a monthly basis, and it's a collaboration of all different types of fields that come together to discuss these issues. And we're not just sitting around talking about it, we're actually doing actionable things. We have a task force set up where we have 7 different work groups, and where each work group comes in and has a specific project that they work on, and we're seeing a difference from these things. Another thing that my unit does as well is computer crime cases, and specifically we have computer forensic specialists in our office that analyze computers that come into our office from just about any type of criminal investigation that you can think of. And that's important because in response to the legislature's passage of House Bill 200 and to the excellent tool that they gave us to investigate these cases and prosecute these cases, the GBI created a whole new work unit to work on this issue. It was called the Human Trafficking Unit. And we worked in that capacity for a year, maybe a year and a half or so. And what we saw was it was so intermingled with computer crimes and the internet and things like that. And we actually combined that unit with our child exploitation unit because to utilize those resources and to be a force multiplier with that. So I thank you for having me here today. I'm honored to represent the GBI and honored that you invited me here today.
So Rose said she had her pad and pen. Well, I'm the attorney, so I'm going to stand and use my PowerPoint. And I'm also prone to talk a lot, surprise. And so you may have to wave at me if this gets too lengthy. And I love having an audience bigger than 14, which is usually what's in the jury box in a criminal case because we have 12 and 2 alternates. So thank y'all for having me here today. I am a federal prosecutor with the United States Attorney's Office here, which is part of the Department of Justice. And also the lawyer in me must tell you that my statements are not the viewpoint of the Department of Justice or anyone in Washington, D.C. They are my viewpoints here today, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and some of the experience I have gained working as a federal prosecutor here. So I want to ask you, what do you think of when you hear the word pimp? Go ahead and get your giggles out, right? But we're coming up on Halloween, and there will be pimp costumes for sale. And you will see children dressed as pimps. And our culture glorifies pimps, rap stars, and Snoop Dogg, whatever he's calling himself now, who's admitted as he busts across the country doing shows to prostituting women. He admitted it conveniently before the statute of limitations, so he hasn't admitted anything we can prosecute him for. But, I mean, our culture thinks it's cool. And young, impressionable girls think it's cool. And they think it's cool when they have money and the money is spent on them, which it usually initially is. But it's family members who are pimps. It's friends, and mostly what we see a lot of is men pretending to be their boyfriends. And I say pretending Because I use the word woo, being from North Georgia, I realized it didn't translate very well with the Spanish interpreter when I said woo, so now I use the word romance. But they romance these girls, and they make them feel like they're the most special person they've ever met. They get their nails done, they buy them nice clothes, they treat them better sometimes than they've ever been treated, and then that's the person they trust and love who does this to them. So it's really horrific when they don't have a good support network and the person they were relying on becomes their exploiter. Women have been, and young girls have been recruited in Atlanta at malls, at Underground, at Atlantic Station, Atlantic Square. Like you heard the Attorney General say, they just walk up to you in the mall and say, hey, you're pretty. Hey, can I buy you lunch at McDonald's? I mean, it's not fancy romancing by any stretch. It's just being kind to them initially sometimes is all it takes. We have trafficking going on in strip clubs and massage parlors here. Recruiting is also done at home, at youth shelters and the home, DBACS homes for young girls and boys. And this is typically who they're targeting, people who may have self-esteem issues, as the Attorney General said, or who are runaways. At-risk individuals who are chemically or dependent on drugs or alcohol, those who have been sexually abused. I don't remember the statistics exactly, but it's incredibly high that young girls and women who end up in prostitution have been sexually abused first, frequently. Women and children from other countries are also sexually trafficked in Atlanta, and that's a special area that the federal government can focus in because we have the Homeland Security Department, which works with foreign victims. One of my passions is to get the word out to foreign communities in Atlanta, because they tend to be very insular communities, that even if you are not lawfully here, you don't have the right to be here with documents. If you're a victim of a sex trafficking crime, you have the same rights as U.S. citizens in seeing that that crime is prosecuted and that justice is done. And so we work with foreign victims as well, getting them trafficking visas, the ability to stay here and assist in their prosecution. And then after 5 years, if they continue to abide by the law, they can be on a path to citizenship. So the federal government has a special area where they can help in the foreign community. So I prosecuted some traffickers from Mexico and one from Argentina who got into the group for bringing in, we know of, over 12 girls into the Atlanta area. And they promised them marriage. They promised them a fabulous life in Mexico, but we need to go to the U.S. for 2 or 3 years and earn some money. And you'll do that working, cleaning houses, working in restaurants, never a mention of prostitution. And when they got here, they were forced into prostitution in Hispanic brothels. In the way, I'm just going to give you a real quick highlight of some different kinds of sex trafficking that we have here in Atlanta. And the way the Hispanic community operates is they have drivers who come pick up the girls every night and take them to the different customers, either in a brothel or an apartment or places where other typically undocumented workers are living and working, and they can take them to those men. The going price for 15 minutes for a Hispanic girl is $35. Half of that goes to the taxi driver. Half of that goes to the pimp. The girls see between 20 and 40 men a night, earning $35 every 15 minutes. It's horrific. And it happens right off of Interstate 85 in Gwinnett County. In Norcross, you can see the different homes where the men lived. And they moved frequently, I believe, and I argued to the jury, to keep the girls kind of off balance, to keep the neighbors from suspecting anything. The girls could tell you where they lived based on where the QT station was and where you turn left and right, but they didn't know their street addresses. I also think they kept moving to keep the law enforcement from getting suspicious. So it happens right here in our community, and the girls were taken all over the state of Georgia. It also happens, as the Attorney General alluded to, with kind of this modeling pitch. Oh, you're beautiful. Have you ever thought about being in videos? You could be a model. And it's flattering, and it's nice to hear. And that's what Jimmy Jones, who kind of looks like the silly pictures I put up first, kind of what he looks like, but it was also his spiel. And he put girls in nightclubs in the Atlanta area and hotels, and nice hotels. The Intercontinental Hotel in Buckhead. Not just your Motel 6s or the ones that you think when you drive down Beaufort Highway, oh, that looks kind of sketchy. I know what's going on in there. It's going on in Buckhead and the nice hotels as well. Mr. Jones pled guilty and was sentenced to 15 years. He was one of our earlier cases back in 2004, 2005. And this is some of the literature he used. He would hand out these cards. You can see him pictured in the white pinstripe suit with these women. And he used other women to recruit the girls. So he would tell them, his company was Candy Girl Casting, you can get into videos. The first thing you have to do is come out with me and get comfortable showing some skin in the clubs, meet the right people. Oh, this guy wants to sleep with you, and he's the key to the future for you. Backrooms of clubs, having sex. He filmed it. He then threatened to post that on the internet. He threatened to show their families. He was very controlling and manipulative, predominantly of women over 18, because he would find them in the clubs and use the clubs until he had to have some basis for getting them in. So typically his were adult women, but young adult women, still not making those choices. And then moving more into what we're seeing a lot of now with the internet and the boyfriend pimp is the recruiting of young girls on the internet, or finding runaways and then posting them on the internet. This is a Backpage.com ad that was used. The young girl in the plaid shirt was a runaway from South Carolina. She was 16. The other two girls, I think, were 18. They were witnesses at trial. This was a colleague of mine's trial. He is speaking this afternoon. His name is Richard Moultrie. He was generous enough to let me use his ad. I have 2 current cases with Backpage ads, but as they are not complete, I don't show my evidence yet. So Richard's case is completed, and Candyman got 17 and a half years for trafficking of the juvenile. The pictures, typically they'll advertise the girl as 18 or young and tasty, young and tender, as the Attorney General said. And this is what you see. I think he understated what Backpage makes, but we'll see what my slide says in a minute. So these girls are posted on Backpage, and men are calling up. The terminology is in-call or out-call. If the girl is coming to you, that's an out-call. If you're going to the girl, that's an in-call. And law enforcement now sets up stings where they pretend to be a John going to a girl to see if they suspect someone's underage, or to call her into the hotel where they're set up. So there are a lot of stings now based on Backpage. Solomon Mustafa, and this is his co-defendant in my terms, but what the trade calls his bottom bitch, the woman who monitored and recruited and kind of kept track of the girls when he wasn't around. So someone asked earlier this morning, see, I just go off on tangents. Someone asked earlier this morning if women were prosecuted. Being a woman, I want to give women a fair shake, and if they're committing the crime, they're going to do the time. So I will tend to charge women in my cases if they have become the exploiter. These are very difficult decisions that we make, because oftentimes they started out being exploited themselves. So even though I have prosecuted females for human trafficking, they tend to get lesser sentences because we take into account the fact of where they came from. But if they're the ones assisting, in this case she assisted in drugging some of the women, she held them down while he raped them, she forced them to ingest cocaine, she, in my opinion, deserved to be prosecuted as well. She got 5 years and cooperated with us. Mr. Mustafa got life. So there's a difference in the culpability and therefore a difference in the punishment penalty. They recruited girls on Backpage and Craigslist, and they recruited primarily adult women, and they recruited them for prostitution. I mean, it was really clear from his ads that he was looking for women to be escorts, and he was going to manage you while you were an escort. So these are adult women who went to him kind of knowing what they were getting in for, and once they were there, he then became physically violent. He controlled them, as I alluded, with drugs. He wouldn't let them leave. He raped them. So even though they had started off willingly engaging in prostitution, it turned into something else. But you can imagine how difficult it is for that woman to come to law enforcement. Yeah, I answered an ad. Yeah, I knew what I was getting into. But it turned into something else. And so in that case, it became human trafficking. And I think that's an important point. It doesn't always start out, the young person or adult doesn't have to start out, being victimized. It can start out as a willing relationship, and then it can change. And he handcuffed the women and duct taped them and took them to Alabama, and we were able to portray his brutality and convince a jury that even though they may have agreed to prostitution, they didn't agree to all the stuff he did to them. I talked about that already. Backpage, in case you aren't familiar, you go onto it and you click the state you're in, and you can click the city area. And so, if you're traveling to Georgia, you can still use Backpage to find young women. This is an ad that talked about how much money Backpage makes. This was October of 2011, I want to say, yeah, and they generated $2 million in 1 month in October alone off their ad revenue. So I thought the Attorney General's number was a little low. I'll tell him about that later so he can up that. And that's 1 month. Backpage used to be part of Village Voice. Village Voice was getting a lot of pressure from state AGs and law enforcement, and so they separated Village Voice from Backpage, and Backpage now operates independently. Village Voice was even getting targeted by some celebrities who didn't want people advertising or buying the magazine, and so they separated. But this is all they do. I'm trying not to show my bias. This is all they do to confirm that you're 18 and that you're not a minor, is that you just click on a little disclaimer on the website. However, Brian was right. We do get a lot of tips from Backpage. They do report to NCMEC if they see any. These are taglines, advertisement lines, so you can just see how these are advertised. I mean, there's just no doubt what's being advertised, right? You don't have to be an Emory Law student to understand what's being advertised here. And these are from the Richmond area. Another colleague of mine gave me these. She had them already on the slide, but they're the same ads here in the Atlanta area. So law enforcement themselves looks at Backpage. Backpage does make referrals to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They also get information from hotel managers and employees. That's a great area of outreach for us right now, is reaching into the hotels. And with the Final Four here, we train volunteers on what to look for, and then sting operations. So a lot of the trafficking has moved off the street, where it was initially when I started prosecuting these cases. It moved onto the internet and into hotels. This is what the tip report looks like. Backpage just says, this ad looks suspicious, this picture looks suspicious, and they refer it to the GBI here in Georgia or the FBI, and they follow up on the tip. And those are the two numbers in Atlanta. There's the 866 number is a toll-free number, obviously, and I am thrilled that they're posting these, and the toll-free number for in DC. What's the organization called? Polaris. The toll-free number for Polaris. I had a little mind blank. In the bars now, so that if you're working in a bar or you're being victimized in a bar, that number is also posted in the bar now, so that the victims can call for help. So thank you all for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, I don't have a piece of paper or a PowerPoint.
Because she's so dynamic herself.
No, but I did have the opportunity to kind of watch your faces while some of the presentations and while the last video, some of those were very new to me too, and I was like, oh. Because this issue can totally break your heart, but luckily our position at Youth Spark is kind of not just to break your heart, because the victims is really truly what fuel us to kind of want to do this work, but it's really all about how to feel empowered to actually do something. And Special Agent Johnson was right. We are actually kind of getting this part right here in Georgia and kind of all holding hands together to actually get action steps completed and to really be able to look at how we can stop this from ever happening to anybody else. I have been working with Youth Spark for about 6 years, and time really flies, because when I first started this, I remember speaking to groups in which the topic wasn't this, the focus wasn't this. We just kind of snuck it in and said, hey, did you know? And a lot of people just didn't know. And a lot of times I would go in, and especially as we began to create law enforcement protocols and training, it was a quick, no, we don't have that problem here. And we went around the state. So I'll tell you a little bit about Youth Spark. We started out back in 1999. It's probably one of the very first agencies to respond to victims, young girls at the time, not boys. We hadn't even begun to say the word boy victims yet. But we were born and are based inside of the Fulton County Juvenile Court, which is one of the largest juvenile courts in the Southeast. And we were able to kind of be the group that went in and advocated to the judges that this girl that was picked up at 11 years old, as you know, that's the average age of entry into prostitution. So she was picked up and basically charged with prostitution at the time, put in cuffs, and went to jail. And the pimps would typically get off with a fine or wouldn't go, and the men who purchased her, they weren't even spoke of at that time because it looked like she was a criminal, or she looked like a willing participant. And so we opened Angela's House, which was the first safe house, and at that time, our name was the Juvenile Justice Fund. So if you're a little more familiar with our journey, we started out as the Juvenile Justice Fund, and we began to work and restore victims basically in Angela's house, which was a house in a rural location and had 6 beds. It looked just like any other house that you drove by, but there were very special young ladies on the inside that was being recovered and healed and brought back to where they were supposed to be, and from where they were taken by adults. And we recognized that if all we ever did was continue to serve girls, that's kind of all we'd ever do when we went through years of different faces, different girls. And finally recognized that we had to work against that. And we created a campaign called A Future Not a Past. And A Future Not a Past didn't physically touch the girls, but we touched everyone who would touch a girl. And we went out and began to do public education, and we began to do a lot of outreach and touch those leaders who could make the biggest push for us. And as we went to the Capitol and said, this is happening, we have lots of girls, we are running through money, saving them, we have a waiting list of about 12 girls. And they said, well, how bad is the problem? We go, it was really bad. And then they go, well, how many girls? And we go, well, we'll show you the list that we've been keeping, but we don't really know how many, but we just know it's a lot. And that's not acceptable when you go into the Capitol and when you want to get money or you want to get laws changed. And so one of the first things that we did underneath the campaign's arm was to do research. And there was no other research that was done in our country. It was kind of like a generic number that was kind of tossed around from different groups, and no one kind of really could find the base of it or what the methodology was. And so we hired a private research firm, just like anybody else who wanted to know anything else, because this thing is kind of like a business. So we began to shift from that first model of research to recognize that because this makes so much money, we have to educate on that same model, which is like the basic laws of economics. So if you take away the demand for a product, what happens to the supply? It goes down. So we hadn't even at that time begun to look at the demand side other than law enforcement who just does their regular job. We just kind of were saying, hey, she's a victim and not a criminal. Don't look at her this way. And in 2007, we began to really shift after we grew a lot of partnerships and was having meetings with people and get people in the same room together, and you don't realize how much you can do with a community until you sit down and start really putting the plan together. And what we realized is that everybody wanted to do something, and it just kind of needed a way to hold hands and move together, and that's kind of what we did. And so the same research firm that we went to find out and get a methodology about the victims, we went to because we wanted to know about the men, and we had known the way that girls were exploited. So the same thing that we did was that we just put an ad up. And we put one in the back of the papers, and they began to call in, and we were shocked because we really hoped that it would be a bunch of the pedophiles and the creepies in the park and those older men just lurking for that young person. But that's not what we found. Out of that study, which is called the Georgia Demand Study, 7,200 men knowingly and unknowingly purchase girls each month here in Georgia. That's each month. Georgia Demand Study. You can get all of this stuff I'm kind of spitting out is on our website at youth-spark.org, and we have so much stuff on there, so you can play around all day if you're what I call a newbie in this issue, because it's kind of like that. And once you realize what it is, and you've been kind of informed about what TV and the media and everything else tells you, you want to know more, because you really want to know, how can this be? And I was watching someone's face, I'm not going to call her out, I don't want her to be embarrassed, but she covered her mouth because she was shocked. Like, how is it that you can have pictures like that on the internet of people and they look like babies? How is this the world that we live in? And so what we do at Youth Spark is now work to create initiatives that will, one, increase the public awareness on things like this, because if more people know about this, it can be a bigger outcry to get them to shut it down. We also work to make sure that people equally understand about the men who do this, not just about the girls and the women who get caught up in this lifestyle. Moving forward, we also recognize, as the Georgia Care Connection came on board with the governor's office, we have the statewide system of care now. So now that any child across the state, she doesn't have to kind of go through our funnel at the juvenile court. She can get the same level of care no matter where she is through the Georgia Care Connection. So all victims, girls and boys, go through there, which we're great to have. But for us, we were thinking, what now? During that time, we began to shift our name because it was the Juvenile Justice Fund. That scared kids, that scared parents, and everybody else, us too. So we changed our name. People coming to us asking for money, and we were like, we want money from you. We don't have money to give. But we changed our name to Youth Spark, and at that point began to look at a positive way to talk about trafficking and how we can empower people to prevent it. Everybody can play a role in prevention now, and because we have the great systems work that we have here in Georgia, we are now allowed an opportunity to begin to shape what the nation's view of prevention is at Youth Spark. There was no other really prevention program out here for young girls that were at risk, so we began to build one based on the services that we had provided with victims and based on our education and what we had known about their vulnerabilities. And for me, I get excited because I want to put the Georgia Care Connection and our safe houses out of business. I want to make that one day that we don't have as many victims coming through anymore. Like, we created all these special systems to work directly with child sex trafficking. How can we get to a place where we don't need those systems anymore? Because it's just something that doesn't happen in our community. So at Youth Spark, we have several ways that we kind of address the issue. We have programs, and we're a 501c3, and our programs are a Future Not a Past. Under a Future Not a Past, we used to do a lot of training. Now the GBI covers all of the law enforcement training, so it gives us opportunity to do something else. And one of those things is really looking at how can we educate the community on the prevention side of things. And we recently released a new PSA. We got a lot of great videos out here, but this one is quite different because it is not just focused on the victim and breaking your heart about the girl. It's really focused on making sure that we bring young people into the movement. A lot of times parents are too afraid to start that conversation because, oh, it's the big sex word, or you want me to talk about sex and pimps? Like, you got to sign off your firstborn to talk about that in school. So we provided this PSA that is very bold, and I think you'll see it at the final closing panel today. But what we wanted it to do is not make it sexually overt so that parents would be afraid of it. But we wanted to make it very bold and unique so that children would not make fun of it. It could be kind of a funny thing because it looks like, how can this be real? But it is real. So we created something that is quite creepy. I'll go ahead and warn you now. But I promise you they will learn something from it. And then we also have a discussion guide on our website so that as a parent, we suggest you start talking to your kid at 11. Because if you're not talking about it, they're talking about it in school. They're getting messages from the media. And unfortunately, what we realized through all of our work with victims is that the girls that are at risk and the boys that are at risk are this close, and they almost look the same. We have to begin to understand what messages that we're giving our young boys that make them grow up to become pimps and buyers. And we have to begin to look at the messages that we give young girls that say, what is this pay-to-play notion? A lot of the things that we kind of offset in our Voices group is either I'm a hoe or I'm a boss. I'm getting something for it. So it's like, if you're having sex and you're not getting anything, that's almost worse. Like, so you mean to tell me that if I get my cell phone bill paid, then it's prostitution, it's exploitation? He's the person I go to handle my business because I don't have my cell phone. So those are the things that we're battling in the prevention program that we have to begin to push out there and really educate parents, because if no one's having that conversation with them, our children think that it's okay to be a boss and get your things taken care of. Some of the parents have actually remarked that if she's out there laying on her back, she better get him to pay for her tampons. That's not okay. And you're not supposed to have to pay for the basic things of life when you're a kid. You didn't even ask to be here. So there are a lot of kids that have a lack of parental support that rely on people and adults who are lurking to take advantage of them. And we have to begin to address that and attack that the same way that we've attacked the victim services. And we're on our way to doing it. So it's good that you guys have kind of gotten the whole snapshot, but you can still kind of be a little empowered that we are kind of changing things in the way, and people love to look at us in Georgia and go, oh my God, when I come to town, please take me to Magic City. I heard about it, like my family members, anybody from college, when they come into town, they really want me to take them to a strip club. And then after I talk to them about the Georgia Demand Study, after I let them listen to some things, they don't want to talk to me anymore, and then they'll figure out. But at the end of the day, what I do and what I get to do and what I'm proud to get to do is to change people's minds about it. I will talk to them about being a victim, but yet they're going to get some knowledge about the whole picture, because how you language it is how they're going to learn. And everybody can take a part of that. So you should feel empowered to be able to have this type of education. So in your fields, wherever you may go. And I saw somebody look crazy because they was like, you came from television? Yes, I came from television. And I don't know why I'm here, but I got to trust the process and realize this is kind of where it was supposed to be right now. So no matter what, on any of your journey, wherever you go, you can be an advocate. Or you can say you're not an advocate, but you really are. Do your thing that way.
I want to, first of all, thank all four of you. And then I want to start off question time with a question that is admittedly very cliche. But what can we do? What advice would you give someone who is in the legal field or otherwise who wants to combat sex trafficking in the world? And it's for all of you, any order that you want to go.
He was the WABE 94.1 FM, the local NPR affiliate. When I was growing up, when we had encyclopedias, you guys are aware of encyclopedias. My father, before I could go outside and play basketball, he would always say, "Now I want you to go grab an encyclopedia and read 20 pages." And that was his way of telling me about research and becoming familiar with things I don't know. You have a great panel here. You have a great panel in all the other forums taking place. And in the day and age of where you have email and all that, just get involved. Ask questions. A lot of times when I've done a story, and Jennifer knows, I'll call her and say, "Jennifer, this group is approaching me, or this person's approaching me. They want to get involved." So if I don't have the answer, I know that I have a collective consortium of people I can talk to. That's so important. Just real quick though, I want to sort of talk about, when Jennifer talked about parents, my role as a journalist who covers education and the issue of sex trafficking, I'll get parents that call me and say, "Well, you did a story about these billboards that their organization had put up, which had the word pimp. I think it had the word job or something." And the parents said, "Well, my 4-year-old can read, and when we're driving around the neighborhood, I don't want to have to explain to them what this word means." And I said, "Well, ma'am, where do you live?" She said, "Well, I live in Duluth. That's not in my neighborhood." I said, "Oh, wait a minute." So I pulled out my little handy notes I have, and I told her about the study that revealed that there was a high percentage of buyers outside of Atlanta in the northern suburbs. And she was like, "Oh," but she wanted to pay. She still wanted to pay to have that billboard removed. Now, I can't tell people what they should do or shouldn't do. All I can do is present the information. But if you want to get involved, there are so many organizations. I can't imagine what it was like, 15 years ago, when there were so many people, warriors out here, who were trying to get this issue to the forefront. And they didn't really have a lot of people to go to. It's different now. You have an enormous amount of people, whether it's the GBI, whether it's the federal, everyone that's working together. So you have that resource that they maybe didn't have 10 or 15 years old. And definitely when I was 14, I didn't know anything about trafficking. I thought everybody was playing basketball and going fishing with their dad. And, my dad was a jazz musician, so I thought everybody had Chuck Berry playing in their backyard. I didn't deal with this when I was 14. I'm 14 now. I got to know that there are people and organizations and resources out here, whether you're a parent or the child. That's so amazing. And just get involved any way you can. No matter what field of law you go into, just get involved. And it's an email click or just a phone call away. You can email me, you can call me. I probably won't have the answer, but I call Jennifer. Jennifer will have the answer. I'll call
Or
somebody.
I'll call special agent.
Right,
Or
we'll
I'll
call-
call.
Somebody has an answer. Somebody can tell you where you can help. So just get involved any way you can. That's my
And
advice.
Jennifer's organization has a race, something too physical for me, coming up.
A duathlon. It scares us too. It's a 5-mile, 5K on the front, a 15-mile bike, and then a 5K on the back end. Now, everybody looks, her face in the back was like, what? What we decided to do with this outside of the old 5K we used to have is we have to touch new people. We all see each other all the time, don't we? Not that I don't love to see them, but I want to see some more people. Some people that I haven't seen. I want some newbies. I want more people because there's more people out there. And we're trying to reach more men. We want more men to come, to the table with us as well, so it doesn't look like, it's just women's issues protecting victims. It's not about that, because there's boy victims too. So with this, what we're trying to do, we are intimidated, yes. We are downright scared, yes. But you can have a relay team. And we want people to begin to look at this as, this is intimidating if you're not a triathlete. But we just got word that the Lieutenant Governor may be doing this race. Atlanta Falcons player Julio Jones has signed on as our t-shirt sponsor and will hopefully be there as it's a bye week for the Falcons. And it's at the Georgia World Congress Center. But additionally to doing things like this that are kind of more cool, you can go onto our website. We have a trafficking resource hub where you can get any information. So not just in your professional worlds can you make new laws or can you go out there and create great policies, which I know that you guys are going to do. Know what your local tip line is. So if you see something, say something. You got to know where, if you see a young person who walking down the street, don't look past them, look at them and ask them, are you okay? Especially if it looks like a child. I'll tell you yesterday that we had one girl in our prevention group who unfortunately is in a homeless shelter. And she came to us on Tuesday. We meet every Tuesday with the girls. And she handed me a sheet of paper and said, oh, Ms. Jen, you should see this. There's a man walking around at the bus stations in the underground. And he's handing this to young girls. She's 16. And because she's in our program, she's educated on traffickers and what makes her vulnerable. And she said he handed it to me, and then he also handed it to a girl who I know is way younger than me. And it was a document titled The Chosen One, or The Chosen Female. And yes, he was a weirdo talking about, he was looking for the special woman to have his baby, and you have to apply. It was really quite creepy. But you could see through that to see what it was it could have been a recruitment for. I immediately praised her and said, you did so well. Thank you for bringing this to me. And then I thought, oh, they're really listening to us. Okay. And then I scanned it and I emailed it to Special Agent Johnson. And I said, do you see that? Oh my God, help. And then of course what his response to me was very legal and normal and appropriate. But the point is, he replied. You can email him and ask him things. Don't be afraid of the leadership that we have here. He responded to, he actually called me on my cell phone. And I was like, oh, okay, then. You got on my phone? And I was like, okay, but what he said was what this guy is doing is not criminal because, of course, he has his website and everything. But I wanted to let parents know if your child's riding the bus, because that child who's homeless, she could have looked at that and said, that's better than my life right now. And yes, I will go with him. Because if he needs me that bad, then I need to be needed at that age and it feels good. So it's all about not just what you're going to do in the legal world, the professional world. You can make an anonymous tip when you see something crazy going on the street. You know what it is. Once you're educated, when you see something, you'll know. And that anonymous call could unlock something for him. It could unlock something for her. And you never know when you would have really been a child saving grace. So education is absolutely key. And plugging in. There's so many organizations out here now. You can really jump in anywhere.
Let me just echo on a couple of comments that have been made. Let me put this out there. A 12-year-old is not interested in having sex for money. Period. Not happening.
I don't think a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old is interested in having sex for money either.
But I say that because you want to get involved. It's by the time it gets to my level, it's too late. We've already got a victim. I'm just trying to clean up the mess and hold somebody responsible, right? But it starts with building the self-esteem and filling the gaps that some of these victims have when they're kids. Because what I see in the cases that we work in Georgia, and mostly in Metro Atlanta, and not all, but mostly, is kids that are running away from a problem they have at home. Whether it be a sexually abusive family members, whether it be drug and alcohol problems, whatever the problem is, they're running, it is so bad at home that they'd rather leave than to deal with it. And then that's where a lot of what you saw up here that Susan was talking about, that's where these exploiters take advantage of it. That's where they're going out and they're saying, hey, you want to go get your hair done? You want to go get your nails done? You got a place to stay? It's not like they're scooping these kids up on the street and they are kidnapping them, don't get me wrong, but it's not like they're throwing them in the back of the car and putting handcuffs on them and driving them away and holding them in a dungeon. It's a recruitment phase. It's a romance stage and things like that. So if we're going to really get to the heart of this matter, is we've got to fill those gaps that some of these homes and families don't have. To give these victims the self-esteem and things like that to where they don't become vulnerable.
Let's go ahead and open up the floor to questions, whether it be for the entire panel or for one panel in particular. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, since this is a scandal, why don't we see more of it in the press? And is there anything that we can do as individuals to press the press to write stories about the scandal?
I think I can take that one. I had a colleague from a television station say to me, wow, Rose, I didn't know. I mean, I heard stuff, but I didn't know until you all started doing it. Now, let's just be really clear, really honest. As the press, we're competitors. We're competitors with CNN. Yes, we're public radio. We're nerds. So we're competitors with CNN, and WSB, and the AJC. And I remember the AJC years ago did do something on the whole Dear John campaign that Shirley Franklin was a part of. When Public Broadcasting Atlanta, a little bitty Public Broadcasting Atlanta, did How to Stop the Candy Shop, and we started doing a series of radio reports leading up to the story of Keisha. So we did these radio reports, the story of Keisha, and to see how it all ended for Keisha, we had to watch the television documentary. I honestly believe that the reporting that public broadcasting has done in this market has sort of forced the other outlets to take notice. Because now, the AJC is always breaking stories about trafficking, and I don't care about that. I don't have to be first. I just want us to be right and accurate. So if the AJC or WSB or 106.7 News, if they're taking a note saying, hey, we need to pay attention, I'm all for that. Now I always tell people, sex trafficking is the new black.